Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second in our series of Grassroots Spotlights, where we'll be highlighting the great work that European movement, local groups and branches are doing all across the UK with the work in their local community. And we're thrilled to be joined today by 4 people from York for Europe, one of our really active group members from the north of England. Martin, you're the chair of the group. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the group, like what sort of things you've been doing, what projects you've got underway this year, and a little bit more about the background of the group.
Okay. Well, York for Europe have been a very active group, really before the referendum, and the people who were involved in the pre-referendum activity morphed into York for Europe within about 6 days of the referendum result, and I wasn't part of it at that point. So I won't go back over the history of the 4 years, because I'd like to fast forward to January the 31st of 2020, when we were all licking our wounds and thinking, what now for us as a group? And we attended a lot of the events that the large conference that Grassroots for Europe put on in London. We listened to lots of webinars. We had our own meetings where we talked about what we thought we would do. And some interesting principles, I think, arose out of those meetings. And a lot of them were to do with the question, what is the role of a group that was pro-Remain, now that Remain is not on the table any longer? And I think some of the reason I think it's important to highlight these things is because these thoughts occurred pre-COVID. So we were imagining a future where we would probably be able to do quite a lot of the things we'd already been doing, and we imagined ourselves campaigning out in the streets one way and another. But the kind of things that we were concluding, I think, was that we could not afford to keep on banging the same old drum that we've been banging for 4 years during the interval between the referendum and the departure from the EU in January. And that people would actually, a lot of people who were even pro-EU were getting pretty exhausted with the messages that they were hearing from us and other groups. So we had to find different things to say, and we probably had to find different ways of saying them. And we need to make these messages ones which people found easy to hear, I guess, is one way of thinking about it, because a lot of minds were closed at that point. And if you mentioned Brexit, that people would you could hear them groan and their eyes would turn to heaven and they would not want to really even talk to you. So we thought that is a really serious barrier that we have to breach somehow. And we can't do it just by carrying on with business as normal. So we devised a number of projects, and a lot of them did fall foul of COVID when it arrived. It was very clear that we couldn't do those projects in a public space. So we were really forced to think, well, what is appropriate then in terms of the situation we find ourselves and our ability to interact with the world, that is also consistent with this business of trying to get our message across in different ways by doing different things. So all of the projects we've chosen to talk about today have an aspect of responding to that demand for different ways of communicating with the outside world and different messages to impart. So that's just the background to what we're doing. And we're talking about 3 or 4 projects, depending on how much time we have. But one of them is a new website that has been launched for some time, which is going to be discussed by one of the team members here, Don Lodge, whose inspiration it was. And I'll leave him to explain that. Barbara Lodge is going to talk about a project which is connecting York as a European city to European influences, European features. So underlining the fact that York is archetypically a European city by dint of its heritage. And then Sally is going to talk about a community project that we have on the stocks at the moment. And there are a couple of other things I might mention if we have the time. But that's all I need to say, I think, to position the projects that you're going to hear about.
Sounds great.
Other than just to say that these are all works in progress. So it's very easy to make these sound as if they're all thoroughly resolved and thought through and have been proven to work in 73 different temperatures. It's not like that at this point. We are indeed going to learn a lot as we go along. We've still got things to decide, but a lot of them are quite advanced, and one of them is already launched, as you will hear. Okay.
Even though that they're still work in progress like that, whenever groups have got great ideas like you have with the ones you've just talked about, we're always very happy to support them and see if we can grow. And
Sure.
so I guess the first one I want to talk about is the York European website, which got our attention. And I guess, Don, why don't you tell us a little about the York European website, which you've been working on?
Thank you. Yes, it came out of I suppose, frustration. COVID helped. Facebook, ironically, helped. The government helped. And so some of us here, I think, are feeling we're a bit fed up with banging on about the obvious, and some of us are heartbroken about Brexit and where it's going, and I won't talk about what's happening in Westminster. So the obverse of that is we talk about what's happening here. We consider our European friends here and our European friends, which many of us have, abroad in Europe and further afield. So what can you do when you can't go out and wave a banner? And the answer is to put up a website. We quickly decided what it wasn't going to be. The word Johnson is not on the site, and unless he visits York, it won't be. We don't want to get into national polemics, which people like Yorkshire Bylines and other groups around the country are doing very eloquently. What we want to do simply is not lose our Europeanness. We are aware in our group here, we have many foreign nationals, some of them, I suppose, predominantly French or German, who are quite understandably broken-hearted about what has happened. You'll read a letter on the website of one who's gone back to Germany and still doesn't know what to do. I've been over here for years. So what we're doing, it is very much work in progress, and it's evolving. At the moment, we're probably getting about 20 new visitors a day, which doesn't sound a lot. That's 140 a week, which is probably more than we got on a Saturday on a market stall. So there's different ways of looking at it. But we are mainly preaching to our friends and the converted. If Brexiters come along and see there's a lot of fun and there's some interest, then God bless them, they join us. But everybody's welcome, even should they emerge, the advantages of Brexit will be promulgated, but I haven't received any yet. So we're very much in progress. I think the beneficiaries, if you look around, the beneficiaries of the project, I think need more work and evaluation, because originally it was just going to be a village pump with a bit of information and a place where friends could gather. I'm actually finding the process of sending letters out, getting postcards to York from European friends and friends of friends. It's amazing the hands across the seamanship we're getting. So I think the secondary aspects of running this site are awfully beneficial, as well as people who just drop in and read it. As I say, work in progress. It's only just got to the stage where it could be called a website, and sections have only got 2 or 3 entries, and we're very happy for people to contribute and come up with further ideas and constructive criticisms. In terms of groups further afield who may, I don't know whether other cities have done things like this, I hope so, but anybody who feels that following this initiative, it's very cheap, it's been done, everything's been done in this room by us two so far, with people writing odd things in, and it's all do-it-yourself, click and paste, HTML, nothing clever or expensive. So let me encourage anybody to have a go. It can be done.
And it sounds like you've had great response. You said you've had all those entries coming in, even though it is only early days. And what would you see as like the ultimate aim of the website, like once it's fully developed?
Well, I suppose the ultimate aim is that it's superfluous. We want to get back into Europe and retain the links that we had 10 years ago. But more seriously, I am going to develop a page with information. There's a thing to go up today about English language lessons, a new project that the York University are just doing for non-English speakers. As I said, it's a village pump. I want it to develop, and I haven't any E-Day fix about which direction it should go. It is organic, and I think that's how it started, and that's how it will end.
I think one of the important things about the page was the link that Don made with Facebook page, with Facebook pages and other social media, we did not want it to be yet another place to whinge.
Yes.
So the tone of it is entirely even-handed, objective, rational, and there isn't an opportunity for people to start picking fights with each other and arguing the toss. It's just a very constructive communication tool, which we think's more palatable to people who aren't wildly enthusiastic about political issues. They may still find a lot of interest in the stuff we put in there. So we're trying to hook in people who may not have thought themselves as being particularly pro-European or that York's a European city, but lo and behold, they find out we are. That would be great.
And I think what you said there as well about like reaching out to people and trying to bring people together is important, because I mean, there's so much division at the moment. If we can, if this website you're creating can help bring people in York together, regardless of what their personal feelings are, I think it's definitely a positive thing.
Absolutely.
Great. So next project I'll talk about is a community project that involves twinning you've been talking about, Barbara. Why don't you tell me a bit about that?
Okay, sort of links in with the idea of celebrating all things European in York. And so I've developed a York Trail on the basis that York's always had long historical links with the European mainland, mainly through the Vikings and the Romans, as we know. But actually, our Europeanness is far more diverse than that. And I really wanted to explore that and highlight it for York residents and also for tourists who come to York when they do come back after COVID. So it's called York in Europe and Europe in York. And what I've done is I've identified about 20 countries in Europe which have left their mark in York, which is, I think, is a fabulous number. And it's set out as a normal trail that people can follow. Some of them are well known. If you take, I'll just give a few examples. For example, Betty's, the well-known tea room, actually was set up by a baker from Switzerland. There's another individual story in York, which is to do with the French airman Yves Mahe, who almost single-handedly prevented more damage through a bombing raid with the Germans during the Second World War, and he's become very celebrated in the last few years. So it's to do, the sites are, they can be buildings or their communities or their businesses or there are individual stories. But I think the more interesting things are the hidden stories. For example, we have the Medieval Merchant Adventurers Hall, where you might say that says everything about links. But actually, when you go a bit deeper, you find this is a wonderful link between Portugal and York through a marriage between a large merchant family in York and Crofts of Porto in Portugal. This goes back many centuries, and they celebrate it on their website. And if you go to Porto, apparently, and you're from York, they will tell you all about it as you go around on the tour. And then there are the other, I think, less known links. For example, there's an Italian who came over in the early 20th century, escaping poverty in Italy, and he set up a very successful ice cream factory and cafes in York. Some people still remember him, and his factory now is a block of flats, but he has his name still emblazoned on there. And just one final little story, which I think is absolutely lovely, is that the curator of York Art Gallery for 20 years after the Second World War was in fact German. He came over before the war as a Jewish refugee and spent 20 years in York at our museum before going on to university and being recognised as a great art historian. I think there are lots of other countries as well. I've even managed to source Finland and Iceland and the Czech Republic, so it goes quite wide.
And these seem to be mainly like stories-based and connections-based as opposed to tourist sites, is that right?
Some are tourist sites, but I always chose them so that they would have an interesting story as well, so people can actually relate to them. because some of the buildings aren't so interesting to look at, but the story behind them are very, very good as well. Yes.
And that can be true when you visit places like York and when you visit some of the big cities around the world. Like, some of the best places that you can visit are ones that have that story, whether they're a famous place or not.
Yes, exactly. And you know, you can only see so many cathedrals, can't you, really? But I think the other key thing about York, I think, is I was talking about the Italian who came over as an immigrant, and there are more immigrant communities that came in, such as the Irish after the potato famine, but also European countries have offered sanctuary to York people. There's this Miles Coverdale, for example, who made the first translation of printed Bible. He had to seek sanctuary in many European countries because he was fleeing religious persecution. So it works both ways.
Great. And is this trail something that's ready now that people can check out, or is it something that's still work in progress?
Now, I'm actually going to launch it on Europe Day. It's ready, ready to go.
I think that's really, really nice to launch on Europe Day, and we'll of course make sure that people can find out about that through the European.
On the website.
Of course, yes.
Scott, can sorry, I'm just to chip in another thought. It's very easy to assume that these kind of things can only be found in cities, but I'm always amazed when I go out. I've been to Scotland a couple of times this year, which is a place I don't know very well. It's amazing how, as a stranger, when you are looking at a place with fresh eyes and talking, you hear lots of stories about people from Europe who've come over the years and made their lives there and contributed to the local area. And so I just guard against the assumption that this works for York, but it wouldn't work for us because we're a rural community and we're a sort of solid white middle class British stock. That isn't true usually.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because it's not just buildings, of which York has many fantastical historical buildings, but it can be businesses, it can be individual stories. So it doesn't have to be a great tourist marker that you're going for. It can be a village, it could be a town. Anyway, you just need to look, I think, and I'm sure it's there.
Sounds amazing. I'll definitely check it out next time I'm up in York, which hopefully it can't be too long with COVID, hopefully. So yeah, if you're watching this before Europe Day, check out York for Europe's website when it comes to Europe Day. And if you're watching this video after Europe Day, go check out their website. I'll put the link in the description at the bottom there for you now so you can check it out. There's so much going on. We'll have to move on to the next project because you've just got so much that you're doing as a group at the moment. So Sally, you've been working on another community project. Could you tell me a little bit more about that one?
Yes, that's right. As you say, this also falls in with the idea of community projects. And I think here what we wanted to do was try and find a way to make a contribution to initiatives that were already going on in York and see if we can sort of add our sort of efforts and ideas, but also in maybe, in a kind of low-key way, as it were, we could find ways to link it with European themes. And so I've been talking with an environmental NGO in York, and what we're looking at is a way that York for Europe could get involved with some natural habitat conservation projects. They have a number of sites around the town, and they're kind of, some of them are linked by a beck, which for those of listeners not from the north of England means a small stream, and so they're quite interested in us sort of getting involved because of course they're always interested in more volunteers helping out, and we also feel that there are many different ways that members of our group can contribute. We have hundreds of people who are members of our Facebook group, for example, but maybe they don't want to come to meetings, especially if they're on Zoom. But maybe they'd really like to sort of do some outdoor stuff with a group of people. So we think that may be a way also for more members of the group to get involved. And what we're really hoping is that we can sort of through, because there's also a group in York that's concerned with the sort of twinning with our two twin cities of Munster and Dijon. And what we think would be really nice is if we can find a way to sort of link up with similar projects, some conservation projects that groups in those cities are involved in, and we could find a way to have some direct linkages. and maybe that's something that, if we are able to celebrate Europe Day, that could be a good platform to sort of start to build those connections. So this one, I think, unlike the other two projects, this is at an earlier stage and it's a work in progress. But I'm quite excited about this idea of working with this other local group and finding a way to sort of work together, and to collaborate and to draw on our respective sort of strengths, and see what we can do.
That sounds amazing. And getting involved in your local community is something we're always encouraging our local groups to do, because just because we are pro-Europeans doesn't mean that we only have to talk about Europe and Brexit. I mean, obviously Brexit has now happened. I mean, there are loads of issues that affect both the UK and Europe as a whole, and conservation is one of those. I think it's really amazing that you're doing that. And is it mainly the conservation projects you're looking to do, or would you start there and then work out from there, or how would you see it happening?
Well, I think that there's other people within the group who are looking at other possibilities. This is just the project that I've been exploring. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there are other ways. And I think the project that Barbara was just talking about is another sort of community project as well. So yeah, I think it's, and I think you're quite right that this is a time to sort of not be completely outward facing, but to focus more on our own community. And
I think you're right there, because I mean, one of the things that I'm quite keen on is I on a personal level, I like volunteering for different projects as well. And if it's a group going out there and volunteering for a particular project, that's what gets the attention and makes you think, oh, that group is interested in our local community, so let's check them out. And I think it's a great way for you to engage in the area and make connections in the local area with groups, with businesses, politicians, local leaders, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you just put it beautifully, actually. And of course, it could also be a nice way to sort of, as we hopefully start to come out of lockdown, it could be a nice thing that we can start to build up as we're allowed, we can go outside in small groups and then larger groups, and it could be something that our membership might really look forward to as well. So that would be nice.
Hopefully a way to keep the group motivated as well, because I can't imagine this has been an easy year for you. So I guess just in finishing on that, I'll go back to you, Martin. So how have you found this year? I mean, obviously this has not been a great year for all of us, but in terms of keeping the group together, keeping the group motivated, I mean, it sounds like the group's been doing a lot of good work, but how have you found it this year?
Well, I'm not going to pretend it's easy. I think all of us from time to time have felt pretty depressed, is the right word, with the situation. We felt very impotent, but it's the old thing about necessity being the mother of invention. So when you find yourself unable to do the things that you would have done automatically by sort of habit, you're forced to think of different ways of doing it. And I think we've come up with some really useful ways of looking at the world. And in fact, I probably get hung, drawn and quartered for saying this, but I really feel personally that the street stall had reached the end of its life for us. We'd all done enough street stalls and been abused by enough Brexiteers. And so it's quite refreshing to think we're embarking on something which will get a civilized response, hopefully, and an enjoyable one, and also do something for our reputation as people with brains pointed in other directions than Brussels. So it's doing all that. So yeah, so it's not been easy, but I think once you get out of the habit of thinking we do this as a campaign group, this is what we do, you come up with lots of alternatives. And I think these examples that have come from the group have been fantastic, and I take no credit for them whatsoever. It's all down to the people who've been talking. So just allow yourselves to think differently, I suppose, is my message.
And you're right. I mean, I think that street stalls do serve a purpose. Like if you're in the middle of a short campaign or trying to drum up in registrations for an election or something. But I think we are now in a bit of a longer campaign period, and I think what you're doing there is absolutely amazing, because you are now thinking to that longer period. Like, how can we get involved in our community and start building stuff up from the ground up? Sure.
Yeah, I'm not knocking a street stall, but you get my point that you can get in a rut that everything is done by street stalls. That's not true. Necessarily, it's not necessarily the best way for everything.
So what sort of messages would you have? I mean, one of the things when I speak to groups around the country, one of the things I'm told quite often is, well, we're in COVID, so we can't really do anything. And I think that you've shown here that there is so much you can do, even if like at the time we record this, we're in the middle of a national lockdown. I mean, what sort of messages would you have for those groups around the country who are thinking that we want to do something because we can't just be sat here, and want to look at your group as an example?
I think I'd just say challenge yourself to work with the circumstances which you're facing, and sometimes they actually serve you. I mean, Don said at the beginning that a number of ingredients came around, and they were all apparently limitations. All the things Don talked about, you could easily look at as total obstacles, insurmountable obstacles. If you look at them as pointers to alternatives, then you come up with a great number of ideas. So just don't buy your own propaganda that you can't do anything, would be my message. And I suppose I would say that because I've spent my whole life working in creativity and innovation. So it's a cardinal sin to say you can't. But I really believe that. I really believe you always can. You can always find a way.
And I think that you're showcasing sort of the power of what can be done on a grassroots level. And that's why we wanted to highlight this to both our members and to other groups and to our wider supporter network, to say that look at the great work that's happening here on a grassroots level with one of our groups. So thank you for everything you're doing on the ground there. I guess we've had to move through things quite quickly here just to stay within time, because you've got so much going on. But I mean, just in closing, is there anything else you want to tell people about what you're up to, or anything else that we weren't able to cover in the spotlight?
I'm wondering whether the European movement broadly, and people like us specifically, because of COVID and because of politics, are going to be attracting a slightly different following. And that means two things. It means, great, we'll get a different load of people, but we don't want to lose the other ones. And I wonder whether there'll almost be a political wing and a cultural wing. And I can hear people screaming against that. But I'm feeling the sort of people who, a lot of people have been very enthusiastic about the website, but they aren't the ones who stand out on rainy Saturdays with banners. And God bless them, we've all been to London a number of times when it needed doing. But I'm wondering whether we're going to get different supporters being active in different ways, and not just automatically think, oh, Joe and Fred, they'll come and write something for the website, because that isn't how it's working.
No, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, different people will be interested in different things. I mean, political parties find this. Like, you'll have some people who want to go into the call centres. They're quite happy to do that. Some people want to stuff envelopes. Some people want to go door knocking. Some people want to do street stalls. There's always so many different things that people can do. I mean, I've been on more street stalls than I can count. I mean, they're not my favourite way of campaigning, but I've done them. But there's so many different. But by reaching out in different ways, you can engage with so many more people on a cultural level, on a political level, whatever it is. So I guess just getting back to you, Martin, is there anything else that's going on with the group that you want to mention?
No, I think we've probably got our hands full with that, actually, Scott. Well, I guess there is one, and that is we are very fortunate in York, and I know that this isn't a situation that most groups are blessed with, but our city council, are actually they are a Green Lib Dem coalition. So we have a sympathetic council as far as Europe's concerned, and there is a conversation going on about a flag day on European Day. So the city council are proposing to fly the Council of Europe flag, which, as you will all know, is coincidentally the same flag as the European Union flag. But that's the excuse that's going to be used. It's Europe Day, and this is the flag of the Council of Europe. So here it is, folks. Again, you may remember this. And we will get that flown over City Hall, and we will try and encourage as many of our members as many citizens of York to fly the flag on Europe Day as we can. And again, that doesn't depend on social distancing, because it's just making a visual statement which individuals can contribute to. So that's another sort of angle that you always have to think about, I suppose, is how can people contribute without getting together all the time.
That's great. I mean, I think a lot of groups around the country really like getting involved in Europe Day. And of course, last year, not much was possible because it was right in the middle of the last lockdown. I know on a personal level, I'm quite keen to get back to the Europe Day picnics, which were quite popular, which we, when I was the chair of Greg for Europe back in 2017, we saw spearheaded down there on Blackheath. But it sounds like you're doing some great work there. So thank you for everything that you're doing up in York.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting us.